Hey everyone, welcome to Plants and Politics. So this is going to be kind of a long segment, but it is incredibly important. So I really hope that even if you have to take a break, you'll come back and you'll hear all of what I have to say about this, because the Stephen Donzinger case should not only piss you off, but it should terrify the hell out of you. It should absolutely terrify every single American, right, left, and center. Doesn't matter what political side you're on. If you're not aware of Donzinger's case, I'm going to bring you up to speed, because it's truly a case of persecution, not prosecution. Here's the deal. Former attorney Stephen Donzinger has been held under house arrest for more than 2 years, and he was just sentenced to 6 months in jail, all for a misdemeanor. Donzinger has not been allowed out of his home for nearly over 2 freaking years, nearly 800 days. This has now risen to the level of a violation of international law, according to United Nations experts. And this appears to be a blatant, orchestrated attack by one of the world's largest polluters, Chevron. So here's what went down. As an attorney, Donzinger won a case against Chevron in 2011. He received a $9.5 billion judgment against this oil company, against this polluter. And this was because his indigenous clients discovered that Chevron had poisoned them by deliberately dumping 16 billion gallons of their toxic waste into the rivers and groundwater and farmland in Ecuador, which caused those areas to just become utterly polluted. And people in the area got sick. They contracted cancer. Many of them died of cancer. So Chevron was ordered, this is after decades of fighting them, Chevron was ordered to clean up the contamination. They were also ordered to cover the healthcare costs of the nearly 30,000 plaintiffs in this case. That's how many human beings were harmed by Chevron. And God knows how much damage they did to the environment, how much wildlife was destroyed, how many animals suffered and died as well. So as you can imagine, with this huge settlement that they were slapped with, Chevron was not pleased. Well, ever since, they've tried to destroy his life. But it wasn't just an effort to punish him. Of course, they wanted to punish him, but it's also because they want to intimidate other lawyers. They want to deter other lawyers from taking up another case against them. That's the real issue. That's really, I believe, and so many others, what they're truly after in going after Donzinger. So Chevron has never paid a dime of this judgment. They've never paid a single penny, which I'll explain why in a minute. But to extract their revenge and just to terrify other environmental attorneys, Chevron filed a RICO lawsuit against Donzinger in the US, a civil RICO lawsuit. They allege that he colluded with Ecuadorian judiciary officials to obtain this guilty verdict against them. But Donzinger and his co-defendants, they figured, we've got the evidence on our side. They believed that they could go to court, that they would be vindicated when a jury saw and heard all of the evidence in the case. Well, Chevron pulled a sneaky move at the last minute. What they did was they dropped their demand for financial compensation in that lawsuit. And based on the RICO laws in the United States, that precluded Donzinger and the other defendants from receiving a trial by jury. So because they said, oh, we don't want any money, he wasn't allowed to have a jury. Instead, the judge who was overseeing the case was granted sole discretion to come up with the verdict. And according to the Nation news outlet, the federal judge in that case was Lewis Kaplan. He was a longtime corporate lawyer, prior to becoming a judge. He also apparently made very strange and numerous pro-corporate statements over the course of the lawsuit, over the course of that case. Now, not surprisingly, Kaplan ruled that Donzinger and the others were civilly liable for racketeering, bribery, and fraud. Since then, Chevron ditched their holdings in Ecuador, and Kaplan's ruling in the US meant that the plaintiffs couldn't collect the judgment in the United States. So all of those people suffering with cancer, the families of the deceased, they've received nothing. They've received zero compensation after being willfully poisoned by this company. Then Judge Kaplan asked the Southern District of New York to try Donzinger for criminal contempt. It wasn't enough that he hit him with his own charges. He then referred it to the Southern District of New York and said, hey, I want you to bring this guy up on criminal contempt charges. Well, the prosecutors looked at the case and they said, no, they declined. That's got to tell you something. So what did Kaplan do? Did he drop it? Did he say, oh, well, I already exacted enough revenge on behalf of Chevron. I already hit this guy with charges? No. He went out and handpicked a private attorney to prosecute Donzinger, which, as the Nation put it, is a, quote, nearly unprecedented legal maneuver. Now, just to give you an idea of how shady this whole thing was, one of Chevron's witnesses against Donzinger was a man, or is a man, named Alberto Guerra. Guerra claimed that Donzinger and an Ecuadorian attorney had offered him a bribe of $500,000 to rule in their favor. And he said that they actually drafted the judgment against Chevron. According to the Nation, however, the news outlet, Chevron paid for Guerra, a disgraced former judge, by the way, to move to the United States along with his family. Why would they foot the bill for all of that? Yeah, that's not suspicious at all, right? And Chevron's legal team also allegedly rehearsed Guerra's testimony with him 53 times prior to his court appearance. Seems like a little overkill. I mean, if you're telling the truth, you don't really need that much coaching and rehearsal. So anyway, the Nation reached out to Chevron spokesman James Craig, and they asked about Guerra. And Craig refused to say if Chevron is still paying him or if he's still here in the United States. In addition, according to Slate and other news outlets, Judge Kaplan, the one who, again, hit them with all these violations and then referred them out, it was declined. So then he went and handpicked these attorneys to prosecute this guy. Judge Kaplan just so happened to be invested in Chevron stock at the time of his ruling. And he refused to recuse himself from the case. Wow. Didn't see that coming, right? So after Chevron got this BS guilty verdict from Kaplan, Chevron then demanded access to Donzinger's personal computer and his cell phone. But the problem was that Donzinger was still in the middle of appealing the Kaplan verdict. So he said, look, I don't want Chevron to see my documents. I don't want them to have access to all of my contacts and everything else. So, and especially what I'm planning in my appeal. So if the Court of Appeals says you have to turn this stuff over, I will do so at that time. But right now, I'm not going to do that. That would be like shooting myself in the foot. So rather than allowing that appeal to play out, which, sounded very reasonable, Kaplan then hit Donzinger. Kaplan, the guy invested in Chevron stock, Kaplan hit Donzinger with another 6 counts of criminal contempt under something called Rule 42. Now, I mentioned Rule 42 because Rule 42 prohibited Kaplan from overseeing that new case, the contempt case. So he then did the next best thing. He violated local rules and he went and handpicked the judge and the private prosecutors to oversee Donzinger's new case, this new contempt case. Kaplan just so happened to choose District Judge Loretta Preska, a judge who, get this, once served on the advisory board for the uber conservative climate denying Federalist Society. Yes, the same fuckers who are responsible for putting the credibly accused attempted rapist Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, as well as Miss Handmaiden Amy Coney Barrett. And Chevron, what do you know, is a major donor to the Federalist Society. In fact, Chevron is one of their top donors. That's why everyone connected to the Federalist Society, which is all conservatives, they're all willing to literally sell their children's futures down the river by denying climate change, denying how fossil fuel companies like Chevron are destroying the planet and everyone on it. They don't actually believe that climate change is a hoax. They just don't give a damn. Now, on top of all of these conflicts of interest, check this out. The 3 private attorneys that Kaplan hand-selected to prosecute Donzinger were Brian Maloney, Serene Armani, and Rita Glavin. At the time of their involvement in this case, at the time that they're prosecuting Donzinger for violating the court's orders, because he won't hand over all of his private information, including the roadmap to what he's going to say in court for his appeal, while they're doing this and prosecuting him, they all worked for a law firm called Seward and Kissel. And guess who Seward and Kissel represented as one of their clients? If you guess Chevron, I'm sorry, but you don't even get bragging rights because even a 2-year-old could have seen that one coming from a mile away. So as recently as 2018, just shortly before Donzinger was ordered to remain jailed in his home by Judge Loretta Preska for a misdemeanor, by the way, that he hadn't even been convicted of yet, the prosecutor's law firm was defending and protecting Chevron. I mean, the conflicts of interest are myriad. They're and blatant. And then in May of this year, Preska finally convicted Donzinger of contempt of court charges. And this conviction was once again decided without a jury, without a trial, without a jury. So for a second time, without being judged by a jury of his peers, and without a jury being able to review and weigh evidence in this case, Donzinger was again convicted of another crime by a seemingly rogue judge with all kinds of conflicts of interest, which leads us to her ruling this week. So after this guy has now spent over 2 years imprisoned in his home, she just ruled that he should be locked up for another 6 months in federal prison for something that no attorney ever in the history of our country has ever spent one single day in prison for doing. For contempt of court, not one attorney has ever in the history of the United States spent one day under house arrest, in jail, or in prison for contempt of court. And just prior to Preska's verdict, the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights issued an opinion, and they stated that Donzinger's 2-year house arrest was illegal under international law. That opinion also said that Donzinger had been denied the right to a fair trial And a panel of 5 prominent jurists said that his confinement was, quote, arbitrary, and that both Kaplan and Preska showed, quote, a staggering lack of objectivity and impartiality. In addition, 68 Nobel laureates have spoken out on his behalf, and 475 attorneys and human rights defenders signed onto a letter, and they called his prosecution, quote, one of the most important corporate accountability and human rights cases of our time. And Massachusetts Democrat Jim McGovern issued a statement. He said, quote, it's the executives at Chevron who should be behind bars. In addition, 2 other Democratic lawmakers, Ed Markey and Sheldon Whitehouse, have also called into question the, quote, highly unusual use of private prosecutors and their employment and obvious conflict of interest in working for a Chevron-tied law firm. And Rutgers law professor Louis Ravison, he was interviewed, and he called the involvement of these Chevron-tied lawyers a, quote, clear abuse that, quote, violates the defendant's constitutional right to due process. You know who hasn't spoken out? You know who hasn't bothered to cover this story? Most mainstream media news outlets. They're silent. They don't care about this abuse. They don't care about the obvious corporate influence over these judges and these erroneous decisions, such as keeping this man imprisoned in his home for more than 2 years and then slapping him with a 6-month prison term. Not even like these people who literally attacked our United States Capitol, who tried to overthrow the government, essentially. They are getting credit for time served. When the judges are giving them their sentencing, they're saying, oh, okay, well, you already had 3 months of home confinement or 6 months of home confinement, so you're good to go. You're now free. No, Judge Kaplan is saying, no, I don't care that I've kept you locked up in your home for over 2 years. You still have to go to jail. Not jail even, prison. The New York Times, this is unbelievable because this guy lives in New York. The New York Times, his home state newspaper, this media giant who called out Trump for human rights violations all the time, they've been completely silent. I couldn't find a single article about this anywhere in mainstream media. Not the Washington Post, not the New York Times, none of the major news outlets. It's certainly not on MSNBC. It's not on CNN. And you know who else hasn't said or done anything? Democratic House member Jerry Nadler. Donzinger has been confined in Nadler's district for more than 2 fucking years. And in addition to this absurd 2+ year confinement, Donzinger was also stripped of his livelihood. He had his license to practice law in New York taken away. Even though, get this, even though a bar representative found that Donzinger should retain his license, that he had done nothing wrong. The State Bar Association appointed a special officer named John Horan to preside over Donzinger's hearings regarding his license. In those proceedings, Horan ruled in Donzinger's favor. He said, quote, the extent of pursuit by Chevron is so extravagant and at this point so unnecessary and punitive. While not a factor in my recommendation, it is nonetheless background to it. Now you may be saying, wait a minute, if they ruled in Donzinger's favor, why did he have his license revoked? Good question. Several months after Horan ruled in Donzinger's favor, a New York state court threw out Horan's findings and disbarred Donzinger anyway. Gee, I wonder how that happened. I wonder if we look any closer, if we'd find more Chevron ties. Think about this, guys. If this can happen to a Harvard-trained attorney, who couldn't this happen to? This could happen to any one of us. The fact that Donzinger's case is being largely ignored by lawmakers and the mainstream media, and he's just being completely railroaded by these judges and prosecutors with clear and total conflicts of interest, should scare the hell out of every single American. And this is also why it's absolutely vital, critical, that we get money out of politics and overturn the insane United States Supreme Court ruling on Citizens United. If the Supreme Court, which, let's keep it real, is run by the Federalist Society, if they hadn't ruled that corporations could donate obscene amounts of money to whomever they choose, this wouldn't be happening to Stephen Donzinger. And think about the dangerous and corrupt cycle that we have going on here. These corporations donate massive amounts of their blood money to groups like the Federalist Society. And then those groups, like the Federalist Society, use that money to essentially place their insane, regressive, conspiracy theorist lawmakers and judges throughout the entire country so that they can keep their corporate friendly decisions like Citizens United from being overturned. We're just caught in one sick, demented, corrupt feedback loop. And consider this. Judge Loretta Preska is overseeing the case against Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's longtime girlfriend, accused of child sex trafficking and pedophilia of dozens, if not hundreds of minors, young girls, some little girls. Given Preska's history in this case, can she be trusted? This is terrifying and disturbing for so many reasons. So as of now, Donzinger is appealing this most recent bogus decision by Judge Preska, and she's ordered that he remain under house arrest while that's in process. This is just unbelievable. The guy can't make a living. He can't leave his home. He's wearing an ankle monitor as if he's committed some heinous crime, all because he stood up for over 30,000 people. So if you're as pissed off about this as I am, here's what you can do to help. Please sign the Free Donzinger petition. And if you can, please help with his legal defense fund. I'm going to drop a link to that information in the description box below. I mean, like I said, he's been stripped of his license to practice law. He can't leave the house. His wife is trying to cover all of their expenses at this point. He has a son. He can't go anywhere and do anything with him. And this guy is holding strong. I mean, he tried to appeal to the judge's sense of compassion and said, you know, I can't even be there for my child and go and do things with him. But you know, he said, I'm not going to apologize for standing up for these people, for doing what's right. So he's a good man and he's being persecuted. This has gone on for years. This is horrible. So please at least sign the petition. If you can help out, anything helps. I mean, don't think a few bucks won't help. I mean, if millions of people put in even $1 or $2, think of how that would help them. So, and he can keep fighting. So I'll keep you guys all posted on this as I hear more. Let's hope to God that people step in that have the power to do something about this and can right this wrong. But essentially, yeah, he's just lost 2 years, more than 2 years of his life because of Chevron's greed and their corruption. So like I said, I'll drop that link below. Thanks so much for watching and listening, guys. I hope you made it this far. Take care. I'll talk with you soon.